What if the man you built an empire with, the man whose child you carry, suddenly treated you like a stranger? For Amelia, this nightmare became a shocking reality. One moment, she was the cherished wife of a self-made millionaire living a life of unimaginable luxury. The next, she was cast aside, forced into a dingy motel room, while her husband's mistress luxuriated in a five-star hotel he'd rented just for her. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of a woman's fierce fight for her dignity, her child, and her future, proving that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest warriors. Amelia traced the delicate gold veining on the porcelain teacup, a custom piece from a small artisan in Florence. It felt cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in her stomach. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse apartment, the city sprawled beneath them, a glittering tapestry of lights. It was a view she had once found breathtaking, a symbol of everything she and Marcus had built together. Now, it felt like the bars of a very beautiful, very expensive cage. Marcus, her husband of 7 years, was a man carved from ambition. He had started with nothing, just a brilliant mind for logistics and an unquenchable thirst for success. Amelia had been there from the beginning, his rock, his confidant, the one who believed in him when no one else did. She'd worked alongside him, sacrificing her own career aspirations to help him build his logistics empire, Sterling Global. And they had made it. Their life was a whirlwind of black-tie galas, spontaneous trips to Paris on their private jet, and a home that was more museum than living space. But lately, a subtle chill had crept into their gilded world. Marcus was distant, his eyes perpetually glued to his phone. His laughter, once a booming, infectious sound, now a rare and hollow echo. He claimed it was stress, a massive new deal he was trying to close that would catapult Sterling Global into the stratosphere. Amelia, ever the supportive wife, had tried to be understanding. She was, after all, carrying their first child, a little girl who was due in 3 months. She'd attributed his mood swings and late nights to the pressure of impending fatherhood and a business on the cusp of greatness. Tonight, however, the chill had become an Arctic frost. Marcus stood before her, his Savile Row suit, immaculate, his face, a mask of cool detachment. He'd just dropped a bombshell that had shattered the fragile peace of their evening. "I've rented out the entire top floor of the Ritz-Carlton for a business associate," he announced, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "They'll be in town for the next few weeks, and it's crucial we make a good impression." Amelia's hand, holding the teacup, trembled slightly. The Ritz-Carlton. The name itself was synonymous with opulence, a place where royalty and celebrities sought refuge. To rent out an entire floor, the expense would be astronomical even for them. "An entire floor, Marcus?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For one person, who is this associate?" "Someone very important," he said, dismissively, adjusting his Patek Philippe watch, a nervous tick she'd come to recognize. "It's a delicate negotiation, Amelia. I need everything to be perfect." A wave of nausea, unrelated to her pregnancy, washed over her. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. It wasn't just the extravagance of the gesture. It was the secrecy, the coldness in his eyes. Marcus had always been a man who enjoyed the finer things in life, but this was different. This felt personal. "Why can't they stay in one of our guest suites here?" She pressed her heart, beginning to pound, a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "We have more than enough room." "I need them close to my downtown office," he retorted, his tone sharp, final. "It's a matter of convenience. Don't question me on this, Amelia. It's for the good of the company. The good of the company, the phrase he always used when he wanted to shut down a conversation. But this time, it felt like a shield, a flimsy defense against a truth she wasn't ready to face. Later that evening, as Marcus slept soundly beside her, his breathing even and untroubled, Amelia lay awake, the conversation replaying in her mind. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor, and made her way to his study. It was a room she rarely entered, his private sanctuary, filled with the scent of old leather and expensive cologne. Her fingers hovered over his laptop, a sleek silver machine that held the secrets of his empire. She knew his password, a combination of their anniversary and the name of the small restaurant where he'd proposed. Her hands shook as she typed it in. She wasn't sure what she was looking for: a name, an email, anything to quell the growing storm inside her. And then she saw it. A folder on his desktop, innocently labeled Project Nightingale. Her blood ran cold. Nightingale. It was the name of a rare, exquisite diamond he had once shown her, a picture of a stone he'd said was too beautiful to be owned by anyone. She clicked on the folder and her world tilted on its axis. It wasn't filled with business proposals or financial projections. It was filled with pictures. Pictures of a woman, a stunningly beautiful woman with fiery red hair and eyes the color of emeralds. She was a stranger, yet in every photo she was with Marcus. They were laughing on a yacht, their heads close together, a bottle of champagne between them. They were dining at an intimate candlelit restaurant, his hand possessively on hers. And then the final soul-crushing image, a picture of the woman, a triumphant smile on her face, standing on the balcony of a hotel suite, the iconic skyline of the city behind her. It was a view Amelia knew well. The view from the Ritz-Carlton. Beneath the photo was a file name that stole the very breath from her lungs: Serafina, our nightingale. The teacup, still in her hand, slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing the splintering of her heart. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles and carefully constructed normalcy. Amelia moved through her life like an automaton, the knowledge of Marcus's betrayal a leaden weight in her belly. She played the part of the happy, expectant mother, discussing baby names and nursery colors with a hollow cheerfulness that felt like a betrayal to herself. Marcus, for his part, seemed oblivious to the turmoil raging within her, his focus entirely on Project Nightingale. A project she now understood had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the woman named Serafina. The breaking point came in the form of a late-night social media post. It was from a casual acquaintance, a self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer named Chloe, who made a living documenting her every move for her thousands of followers. Chloe had posted a series of videos from a lavish party, and as Amelia scrolled through them with a sense of morbid curiosity, her breath caught in her throat. There in the background of a shot of Chloe, air-kissing a minor celebrity, was Marcus. He was standing close to the fiery-haired woman from the photograph, Serafina. Her hand was resting on his chest, her head tilted back in laughter as he whispered something in her ear. The location tag on the post sent a fresh wave of agony through Amelia, the Ritz-Carlton. The carefully constructed dam of her composure finally burst. In a daze of fury and grief, she threw on a coat over her silk pajamas, her hands shaking so violently she could barely fasten the buttons. She didn't have a plan, only a desperate need to confront the lies that were suffocating her. The drive downtown was a blur. She left her car with the valet at the Ritz-Carlton, her heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. The lobby was a symphony of hushed opulence, all gleaming marble crystal chandeliers and the faint scent of expensive perfume. She walked towards the elevator bank, her mind a maelstrom of imagined confrontations, of furious accusations and tearful pleas. "Can I help you, madam?" A stern-faced security guard stepped into her path, his hand raised in a gesture that was both polite and unyielding. "I'm here to see my husband, Marcus Sterling," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "He's on the top floor." The guard's expression didn't flicker. "I'm sorry, madam, but the entire top floor is under a private booking. We have strict instructions not to allow any unauthorized visitors." "I'm his wife," she insisted, her voice rising with a note of hysteria. "I am not an unauthorized visitor." "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to wait here while I make a call," he said, his tone unmovable. The wait was agonizing. Amelia stood in the cavernous lobby, the object of curious glances from the hotel's well-heeled clientele. She felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. To be treated like an intruder in a place her husband had paid a fortune for. The humiliation was a bitter pill to swallow. Finally, the elevator doors chimed and Marcus stepped out. He was alone, his face a thundercloud of controlled fury. He strode towards her, his movements sharp and angry. "What are you doing here, Amelia?" he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "I saw you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "With her, at the party." A flicker of something surprise guilt crossed his face before it was replaced by a chillingly cold mask. "You shouldn't have come here. You're making a scene." "A scene," she cried, her voice echoing in the vast silent lobby. "You're living with another woman in a hotel you rented for her, and you're worried about me making a scene." He grabbed her arm, his grip painfully tight, and pulled her towards a secluded alcove away from prying eyes. "Lower your voice," he commanded, his eyes darting around nervously. "This is not the time or the place for this." "When is the right time, Marcus?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. "When you've moved her into our home, when you've given her my name." "Don't be so dramatic," he sneered, his cruelty a physical blow. "Serafina is important. She's an artist, a very talented one, and she's here for a major exhibition. I'm her patron. It's a business arrangement." "A business arrangement," she repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Is that what you call it? The pictures on your computer, the secret parties, is that all just business?" He had the grace to look away, a faint flush of color on his cheeks. "It's complicated," he mumbled. "It seems very simple to me," she shot back, her voice gaining strength from her anger. "You're having an affair, and you're flaunting it in my face." He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if her pain was a tedious inconvenience. "Look, Amelia, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be getting so worked up. It's not good for the baby." The mention of their unborn child coming from his lips was the ultimate betrayal. "Don't you dare use our baby as an excuse for your despicable behavior," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I'm thinking of you," he said, his voice softening into a tone of patronizing concern that was even more infuriating than his anger. "This is a very stressful situation. I don't want you to be in the middle of it. I've made arrangements for you." "Arrangements?" she asked, a sense of dread coiling in her gut. "There's a motel just a few blocks from here," he said, not meeting her eyes. "The Starry Night Motel. I've booked you a room. It's quiet out of the way. You can rest there away from all of this drama." Amelia stared at him dumbfounded. The Starry Night Motel. She knew the place. It was a grimy, run-down establishment known for its hourly rates and questionable clientele. The thought of it, with its threadbare carpets and a permanent smell of stale cigarettes was a world away from the luxurious life she was accustomed to. "You want me to sleep in a motel?" she asked, her voice a strangled whisper. "While your mistress lives in the lap of luxury on my husband's dime?" "It's for the best," he said, his voice firm, final. "Just for a little while until I can sort things out. I'll have one of my drivers take you there." He turned to leave, as if the matter was settled, as if he had just arranged for a package to be delivered, not banished his pregnant wife to a seedy motel. "No," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. "I won't go. You can't make me." He turned back to her, his eyes cold and hard as steel. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, Amelia. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Go to the motel. I'll call you tomorrow." He walked away without a backward glance, leaving her standing alone in the opulent lobby, the weight of his betrayal crushing her. She was no longer just a wife who had been cheated on. She was a woman who had been discarded, deemed unworthy of even a shred of respect or compassion. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but it was now mingled with something else, something harder and more resilient. It was the first spark of a fire that would either consume her or forge her into something stronger than she had ever imagined. The taxi pulled up to the Starry Night Motel, its flickering neon sign casting a sickly green glow on the rain-slicked pavement. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp concrete and despair. Each drop of rain that streaked down the grimy window of the cab felt like a tear for the life that had been stolen from her. The driver, a kind-faced man with weary eyes, looked at her in the rearview mirror, a question in his gaze. He had picked her up from the Ritz-Carlton, her designer coat, a stark contrast to her tear-streaked face. Now he was dropping her off at a place that was the very antithesis of everything her life had been. The room was even more dismal than she had imagined. The threadbare carpet was stained with a history of sorrows she didn't want to contemplate. The air was thick with the cloying scent of cheap air freshener, failing to mask the underlying odor of stale cigarettes and regret. A single bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting long, menacing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The bed, with its lumpy mattress and thin, scratchy blanket, looked as uninviting as a slab in a morgue. Amelia sank onto the edge of the bed, the springs groaning in protest. The silence of the room was deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of emotions raging within her. The humiliation of the evening, the cold, dismissive look in Marcus's eyes, the casual cruelty of his actions. It all washed over her in a fresh wave of despair. She wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, a protective gesture, a promise to the tiny life within her that she would not let this break them. She spent the night in a state of suspended animation, too numb to cry, too heartbroken to sleep. As the first grey light of dawn filtered through the grimy window, a new feeling began to emerge from the ashes of her grief, a cold, hard anger. She had been a fool, a blind, trusting fool. She had poured her heart and soul into building a life with a man who had discarded her as easily as he would a piece of trash. Her phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Hope you slept well. Stay put. I'll be in touch." The casual cruelty of it, the utter lack of remorse, was like a slap in the face. It was in that moment that the last vestiges of the woman she had been, the gentle, forgiving Amelia, died, and a new woman, a woman fueled by a righteous fury, was born. She knew she couldn't fight him alone. He was too powerful, too well connected. She needed an ally, someone who knew his secrets, his weaknesses. Her mind raced, sifting through the names and faces of the people in their life. And then a name surfaced from the depths of her memory: David Chen. David had been Marcus's right-hand man, a brilliant financial analyst who had been instrumental in the early success of Sterling Global. He was quiet, unassuming, with a mind like a steel trap. He had been fiercely loyal to Marcus until one day he was simply gone. The official story was that he had left to pursue other opportunities, but Amelia had always suspected there was more to it. She remembered the hushed whispers, the dark rumors of a bitter falling out of a deal gone wrong, of a betrayal that had left David financially ruined and professionally blacklisted. Finding him was easier than she expected. A quick search online revealed a small, independent financial consulting firm he had started. She called the number, her heart pounding. When a familiar, calm voice answered, she almost lost her nerve. "David," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's Amelia. Amelia Sterling." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She could hear the faint sound of traffic, the distant wail of a siren. "Amelia," he finally said, his voice laced with a mixture of surprise and caution. "It's been a long time. I need your help," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I'm in trouble. Marcus." She didn't need to finish the sentence. The story was in the tremor in her voice, the desperation in her tone. They met an hour later at a small anonymous coffee shop far from the prying eyes of the world they had both once inhabited. David looked older than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his dark hair threaded with silver, but the intelligence in his gaze was as sharp as ever. She told him everything. The affair, the Ritz-Carlton, the motel, the cold, calculating way Marcus had cast her aside. As she spoke, she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a shared understanding of the man's capacity for cruelty. When she had finished, he leaned back in his chair, a grim expression on his face. "I'm not surprised," he said, his voice low. "I saw this side of him, the ruthless, cutthroat side. I just never thought he would turn it on you." He then told her his own story. He had uncovered a series of shady deals. Marcus had made deals that put the company at risk, deals that lined his own pockets while jeopardizing the investments of their clients. When David confronted him, Marcus had turned on him with a chilling ferocity. He had fired him, smeared his name in the industry, and used his army of high-powered lawyers to ensure that David was left with nothing. "He's a predator," David said, his voice filled with a quiet, simmering anger. "He preys on loyalty and trust, and when he's done with you, he discards you without a second thought. I want to fight him." Amelia said, her voice stronger now, fueled by a shared sense of injustice. "I want to expose him for what he is." A slow smile spread across David's face, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "He's not as invincible as he thinks he is," he said. "He's overleveraged, desperate. This big deal he's been talking about, it's a lifeline. Without it, Sterling Global will implode." "What is the deal?" Amelia asked, leaning forward, her eyes wide with anticipation. "He's trying to secure a massive investment from a notoriously ruthless venture capitalist, a man named Alistair Finch," David explained. "And from what I have heard, Finch is not a man who tolerates complications." And Serafina, Amelia asked the name, a bitter taste in her mouth. "She's the key," David said, his eyes gleaming with a newfound excitement. "She's not just an artist. She's Finch's protégé, his rumored lover. Marcus isn't just her patron. He's using her to get to Finch." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture that was even uglier than Amelia had imagined. Marcus wasn't just having an affair. He was using this woman, this Serafina, as a pawn in his high-stakes game of corporate chess. So if Finch finds out about me, about the baby, Amelia began, her mind racing. He'll pull the plug on the deal so fast, it will create a sonic boom. David finished, a predatory glint in his eyes. Marcus has built his empire on a foundation of lies. All we have to do is pull out the right card, and the whole house will come tumbling down. In that small, unassuming coffee shop, amidst the aroma of roasted beans and the clatter of ceramic cups, a powerful alliance was forged. A wronged wife and a betrayed friend, united by a common enemy and a shared thirst for justice. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but for the first time since her world had been shattered, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman with a plan, and she was ready for war. The Starry Night Motel, once a symbol of her despair, became Amelia's war room. The peeling wallpaper and lumpy mattress were a constant, visceral reminder of what she was fighting for: her dignity, her child's future, and a reckoning for the man who had so casually discarded her. Fueled by coffee and a cold, burning rage, she and David worked tirelessly, piecing together a strategy to dismantle Marcus's empire of lies. David, with his intimate knowledge of Sterling Global's inner workings, was the architect of their plan. He worked his old contacts, his voice a low, persuasive murmur on the phone, as he coaxed information from former colleagues who had also been burned by Marcus's ambition. He resurrected old files he had saved on a hidden hard drive, a treasure trove of incriminating evidence he had kept as an insurance policy. Spreadsheets, emails, and financial records painted a damning portrait of a man on the brink of financial ruin, a man who had been playing a shell game with his investors' money for years. Amelia, in turn, provided the crucial personal insights that David lacked. She knew Marcus's habits, his vanities, his pressure points. She knew the names of the people he was trying to impress, the social events he would be attending, the subtle ways he used his wealth and charm to manipulate those around him. She became the strategist, using her intimate knowledge of her husband to predict his next move. Their plan was audacious, a high-wire act with no safety net. It was a multi-pronged attack designed to hit Marcus where he was most vulnerable: his reputation and his wallet. The first step was to create a crack in the carefully constructed facade of his perfect life. Amelia, with David's help, drafted an anonymous letter. It was a masterpiece of subtle insinuation, hinting at a scandal brewing within Sterling Global, a story of a jilted wife and a secret love child. They sent it not to the mainstream media, but to a handful of influential financial bloggers and gossip columnists, the kind of people who thrived on rumor and innuendo. They knew that the whispers would be more damaging than a full-blown exposé, creating an aura of uncertainty and instability around Marcus at the very moment he needed to project an image of absolute control. Next, they targeted Serafina. Amelia, remembering the name of the gallery that was hosting her exhibition, did some digging. She discovered that the gallery was owned by a woman renowned for her progressive feminist views, a woman who had built her career on championing female artists. Amelia, using a burner phone, called the gallery owner. She didn't reveal her identity, but she painted a vivid picture of a young, ambitious artist being used as a pawn by a ruthless married millionaire. She spoke of a pregnant wife cast aside, of a story that was the very antithesis of the female empowerment the gallery owner purported to champion. The seed of doubt was planted, but the cornerstone of their plan, the pièce de résistance, was the takedown of the deal with Alastair Finch. David, through his network, discovered the time and place of the final meeting, a high-stakes dinner at an exclusive members-only club, a place where fortunes were made and lost over a bottle of vintage Bordeaux. And he also discovered a crucial piece of information. Finch was a man obsessed with his own legacy, a man who prided himself on his moral compass, at least publicly. He had recently endowed a new wing of the city's children's hospital, a gesture that had earned him glowing headlines and a reputation as a philanthropist. This was their opening. "We need to get to Finch before Marcus does," David said, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. "We need to present him with a story he can't ignore." Amelia's role in this was the most dangerous, the most emotionally fraught. She would be the face of their campaign, the living, breathing proof of Marcus's treachery. It was a terrifying prospect to expose her deepest pain to the world, to become a tabloid headline, a subject of public pity and speculation. But the thought of her daughter, of a future where she was not beholden to the man who had so cruelly wronged her, gave her the strength she needed. They began to prepare their dossier, a meticulously compiled collection of evidence that would leave no room for doubt. It included copies of Marcus's emails to Serafina, bank statements detailing the extravagant gifts he had lavished on her, and a timeline of his affair that corresponded perfectly with the downward spiral of Sterling Global's finances. But the most powerful piece of evidence was something more personal, more visceral. It was a sonogram of her unborn child, a grainy black-and-white image that was a testament to the life that Marcus had so carelessly disregarded. And alongside it, a copy of the receipt from the Starry Night Motel, a stark, undeniable symbol of his cruelty. The final piece of their plan was the most audacious of all. David discovered that Marcus, in a desperate attempt to curry favor with Finch, had secured a table at the city's most prestigious charity gala, an event that benefited the very children's hospital Finch had so publicly supported. It was the social event of the season, a place where the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. And Marcus, ever the showman, was planning to make a grand entrance with Serafina on his arm. "This is it," Amelia said, her voice a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "This is where we make our stand." They worked feverishly, finalizing the details of their plan. David would leak the dossier to Finch's office an hour before the gala, ensuring that the information was fresh in his mind when he arrived. And Amelia would confront Marcus in the most public way imaginable, in a room full of the very people he was so desperate to impress. She bought a dress, a stunning floor-length gown of deep crimson, a color that symbolized both her anger and her newfound power. She had her hair and makeup done, not to impress Marcus, but to arm herself with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. As she looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror of the motel room, she saw a stranger looking back at her. The soft, gentle lines of her face had been replaced by a sharp, determined edge. The fear was still there, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, unwavering resolve. She was no longer Amelia Sterling, the millionaire's wife. She was a woman on a mission, a warrior ready to reclaim her life. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the final act of the drama was about to begin. The Grand Imperial Hotel's ballroom was a world unto itself, a breathtaking ecosystem of power and influence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small carriage, dripped light onto the scene below, glinting off a king's ransom in diamonds and reflecting in the polished marble floor. A string orchestra played softly in the corner, its classical melodies providing a sophisticated soundtrack to the low, humming drone of 100 conversations where fortunes were decided and reputations were forged. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, hothouse flowers, and the subtle, metallic tang of ambition. This was the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, the undisputed pinnacle of the city's social calendar, a place where philanthropy and ruthless capitalism danced a delicate, intimate waltz. From a secluded alcove near the service entrance, hidden behind a large potted palm, Amelia watched this world breathe. Every nerve in her body felt like a live wire humming with a terrifying cocktail of adrenaline and fear. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, a constant grounding reminder of her purpose. The crimson silk of her gown felt like armor, but beneath it, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady, elegant rhythm of the orchestra. She could feel the stares of the few waiters who passed by, their eyes lingering on her, a solitary pregnant woman, in a couture gown so obviously out of place in the servants' corridor. For a moment, the crushing humiliation of the Starry Night Motel washed over her again, the feeling of being discarded, of being invisible. She took a deep, shuddering breath, pushing the memory down. Tonight was not about that woman. Tonight she was not a victim to be hidden away. She was a reckoning. She had timed her arrival to perfection, slipping in through a side entrance David had arranged, bypassing the red carpet and the prying lenses of society photographers. Her target was not the press. It was the court of public opinion within these four walls, the jury of Marcus's peers. Just then, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. The low hum of conversation faltered, and heads began to turn towards the grand staircase. Amelia peered around the edge of the palm frond. It was them. Marcus Sterling made his entrance as if the room had been built for this very moment. He descended the stairs with the easy, predatory grace of a man who believed he was king of the jungle. His tuxedo was bespoke, fitting his athletic frame to perfection. His smile was a weapon white and dazzling, deployed with strategic precision. And on his arm, a perfect accessory to his triumph, was Serafina. She was a vision in emerald green silk, a dress that clung to her slender figure like a second skin, and made her fiery hair burn even brighter. Her beauty was breathtaking, but it was also sharp, challenging a statement of defiance. Together, they were intoxicating, a supernova of beauty, wealth, and success. They paused at the foot of the stairs, basking in the attention, a modern-day god and goddess descending from their Olympus. For a heart-stopping second watching them, Amelia felt the ghost of a life, a phantom limb of a future that had been amputated. The pain was sharp, visceral, but it was immediately cauterized by a wave of cold fury. That life had been a lie. This spectacle was a lie. She watched as Marcus, oozing a charm that was as practiced as it was false, began to navigate the room. He was a master puppeteer, shaking hands, clapping backs, his laughter echoing with false bonhomie. He was heading for the main prize, the center of the room's gravity, Alistair Finch. Finch was an imposing figure, a man in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He stood with a glass of whiskey in his hand, a small deferential circle of men around him. As Marcus and Serafina approached, the circle parted, admitting them into the inner sanctum. Amelia saw the handshake, the warm greeting for Serafina, the confident man-to-man clap on the shoulder Marcus gave Finch. This was it. The deal was being sealed not with ink, but with smiles and scotch in the public eye. David's text came through at that exact moment. Dossier delivered to Finch's head of security. He'll have it on his tablet now. The stage is yours. Amelia's blood ran cold, then hot. It was time. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and stepped out from behind the palm. Her first steps onto the polished marble were tentative, but with each one, her resolve hardened. She began to walk, not towards the center of the room, but along its perimeter, a slow, deliberate orbit. She let them see her. At first it was just a few curious glances. Then recognition dawned on the faces of people she knew, wives of Marcus's business associates, old friends from a life that now felt a century away. Conversations faltered. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, like a virus. "Is that Amelia Sterling? I thought she was traveling. My God, she's pregnant. What is she doing here?" The sound of the room began to change. The confident hum of conversation was being replaced by a nervous, excited buzz. The orchestra seemed to play to an empty room as more and more people turned their attention to the silent, crimson-clad woman making her inexorable way around the ballroom. Marcus felt the shift before he saw her. He was a man finely attuned to the social climate, and he could sense the sudden drop in temperature. He looked up from his conversation with Finch, his smile faltering as he scanned the room, and then his eyes locked with Amelia's. For a split second, his face was a canvas of pure shock, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with disbelief. It was quickly replaced by a thundercloud of fury. He excused himself from Finch with a muttered apology and tried to intercept her to head off the collision he knew was coming. But Amelia changed her trajectory, turning on her heel and walking directly towards the center of the room, towards him, towards Finch, towards the epicenter of his lies. He met her halfway, grabbing her arm just above the elbow, his grip painfully tight. "What in God's name are you doing, Amelia?" He hissed, his voice a venomous whisper, his smile a grotesque fixed mask for the benefit of the onlookers. "You are making a scene. You need to leave. Now." Amelia looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face, her expression one of cool disdain. "Take your hand off me, Marcus," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the unmistakable ring of command. He hesitated, his eyes darting around at the sea of curious faces that now surrounded them. Reluctantly, he dropped his hand. "You look well," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "It seems the stress of your big deal hasn't affected you." She let her gaze drift meaningfully over to Serafina, who was now watching them, a confused and slightly annoyed frown on her perfect face. "Amelia, this is neither the time nor the place," Marcus ground out, his jaw tight. "On the contrary," Amelia replied, her voice rising just enough to be heard by those closest to them. "I can't think of a better place." She took a step past him, closing the distance to Alistair Finch. The crowd parted for her as if she were Moses and they the Red Sea. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice clear and steady, a beacon in the suddenly silent room. She extended a hand. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. My name is Amelia Sterling." Finch, intrigued, took her hand, his sharp eyes taking in her crimson dress, her visible pregnancy, and the raw courage in her eyes. "A pleasure," he said, his gaze flicking to Marcus. Any relation before Marcus could formulate a lie, Amelia answered. "I'm his wife." The words dropped into the silence like stones into a still pond, the ripples spreading outwards, a collective audible gasp from the crowd. Serafina, who had been watching with a mixture of impatience and dawning dread, went rigid. "Wife." Her voice was sharp, brittle, cracking the silence. She turned to Marcus, her emerald eyes blazing. What is this woman talking about? Marcus? Who is she? Marcus's face, which had been pale, now turned a blotchy, panicked red. He looked like a drowning man. She's my ex-wife, he stammered the lie, clumsy and transparent. We've been separated for some time. She's not well. She's having some sort of breakdown. Amelia let out a laugh. It wasn't a sound of mirth, but a cold, sharp sound of disbelief that echoed in the cavernous room. An ex-wife. That's news to me, Marcus. We shared a bed less than a week ago. And as for my breakdown, perhaps it has something to do with my husband renting out the entire top floor of the Ritz-Carlton for his mistress, while forcing his pregnant wife to sleep in a flea-bitten motel. Every detail was a hammer blow, each word chosen to inflict maximum damage. She saw the look of utter horror and humiliation on Serafina's face. The younger woman stared at Marcus, her expression a mixture of fury and disgust. You told me you were divorced. Serafina spat, her voice trembling with rage. You told me she was a bitter ex who was trying to extort you, a motel. The word dripped with revulsion. She looked from Amelia's belly to Marcus's panicked face, the pieces of his deception clicking into place. She wasn't his partner. She was his alibi, his pawn. Alistair Finch, meanwhile, had been silent, his face an unreadable mask. He pulled a sleek tablet from his inside pocket, his thumb swiping across the screen. David's dossier. Amelia watched as Finch's eyes scanned the document, his expression hardening with every line. He read the damning emails, the financial statements that painted a picture of reckless desperation, the receipt from the Starry Night Motel, and finally, the sonogram of an unborn child. When he looked up, his eyes were chips of ice. He directed his gaze not at Amelia, but at Marcus, who seemed to shrink under the force of his stare. Is this true, Sterling? Finch's voice was low, but it cut through the room like a razor. Are you bankrupting your company to fund your sordid little affair? Are you so pathetic that you had to use my protégé, a woman I have invested in, as a bargaining chip to get to my money? Serafina didn't wait for the answer. With a cry of pure rage and humiliation, she ripped the stunning diamond bracelet from her wrist, a bauble Amelia recognized from the photos on Marcus's laptop, and threw it at his chest. You are a liar and a parasite, she hissed, her voice shaking. We are finished. Without another glance, she turned and stormed through the stunned crowd, her emerald dress a streak of fury as she disappeared from the ballroom and from Marcus's life. The room was now utterly silent, a tableau of public disgrace. The orchestra had stopped playing. The waiters stood frozen. Everyone's eyes were on Marcus, who stood alone, exposed, his empire of lies having crumbled around him in the space of 5 minutes. Finch took a deliberate step closer to him, his voice dropping to a menacing growl that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. I have built my reputation over 50 years on integrity and strength. You have brought your filth and your weakness into my orbit. The deal is off, and I will personally make it my mission to inform every bank, every investor, and every client on my list what kind of man you are. You will be a pariah in this city by sunrise. Now get out of my sight. It was a complete and total annihilation. Marcus stood there for a long moment, his face a ruin, the gazes of 100 of the city's most powerful people like physical blows. He looked at Amelia, his eyes filled not with remorse, but with a venomous, impotent hatred. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and utterly destroyed. He turned, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Sterling fled, walking through the crowd that parted for him with a mixture of pity and contempt, his triumphant entrance a bitter memory, his exit a walk of shame. Amelia stood alone in the center of the silent room. She had done it. The fire of her rage had been quenched, replaced not by triumph, but by a profound and weary sense of justice. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, but the pity was gone, replaced by something akin to awe. She had walked into a den of lions and emerged the victor. With a final steadying breath, she turned her head, held high, the crimson of her dress, a defiant banner. She walked out of the ballroom not in a rush, but with the slow, deliberate grace of a queen leaving her court. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Behind her lay the smoldering ruins of a life built on lies. Ahead of her, a future she would build on the solid ground of truth. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind of headlines and hushed gossip. Millionaire's empire crumbles amidst scandal, screamed one newspaper. Wife's dramatic takedown of cheating husband, read another. The story was a cautionary tale, a modern-day fable of hubris and downfall, and Amelia was at the center of it all. But she refused to be defined by the drama. While Marcus's world imploded, his company collapsing under the weight of his debts and his reputation in tatters, Amelia focused on building a new life for herself and her daughter. A few weeks after the gala, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl whom she named Lily, a symbol of purity and new beginnings. Holding her daughter in her arms for the first time, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. The anger and the grief that had consumed her for so long had finally receded, replaced by an overwhelming love and a fierce determination to create a world for her daughter that was safe and secure and free from the shadows of the past. The divorce was swift and decisive. With the evidence she and David had compiled, Marcus had no choice but to agree to her terms. She didn't want his blood money, the ill-gotten gains of his deceit. She wanted what was rightfully hers, her share of the empire she had helped him build, the assets that were untainted by his fraudulent deals. With her newfound financial independence, she didn't retreat into a life of quiet luxury. She remembered the cold, lonely despair of the starry night motel, the feeling of being utterly alone and powerless. And she knew that there were countless other women who had faced similar betrayals, who had been left with nothing, their voices silenced, their dreams shattered. She established the Lily Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing legal aid, financial counseling, and emotional support to single mothers who had been victims of financial abuse. Her story, which had once been a source of shame and humiliation, became a source of inspiration, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of fighting for justice. She and David remained close friends, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared battle. He became a trusted advisor to the foundation, his financial acumen now used to empower women rather than to enrich a single greedy man. One sunny afternoon, a year after the gala, Amelia stood on the balcony of her new home. A bright, airy house, filled with laughter and light. She looked out at the city, the same skyline that had once felt like the bars of a gilded cage. Now, it was a landscape of endless possibilities. She held Lily in her arms, the little girl's laughter, a sweet melody in the warm air. She was no longer defined by her husband's betrayal, by the pain he had inflicted upon her. She was a mother, a philanthropist, a survivor. She was a woman who had walked through the fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, more compassionate, and more determined than than ever before. She had lost a life of unimaginable luxury, but she had gained something far more valuable: her freedom, her voice, and a future that was entirely her own. And in the quiet strength of her new beginning, she found a happiness that was more real, more profound than any she had ever known. The story of the millionaire's wife in the motel was over. The story of Amelia, the woman who had built an empire of hope on the ashes of betrayal, was just beginning. There you have it, a story of devastating betrayal, but also one of incredible strength and rebirth. Amelia's journey from a heartbroken wife to a powerful advocate for change shows us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rewrite our own narratives. What did you think of her incredible transformation? Could you have been as brave and strategic as she was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Amelia's story and want to hear more tales of drama, resilience, and ultimate triumph, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep bringing you these compelling stories. Click that subscribe button now so you don't miss what's coming next.